Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and today I'm here with Brownells Daily Defense to talk to you about running a bag gun. All right, so if you haven't watched the video about bag guns, definitely check that video out. What we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be doing more of like a compare and contrast between our bag gun and our handgun. We're going to try to kind of establish some baselines and kind of figure out what is kind of like the point of diminishing returns between both these platforms, so you can kind of get a better understanding about where one fits better versus the other. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is safety. Safety is going to be paramount when we're doing this, partly because this gun is going to be out of our control. It's going to be secured inside of this bag. So we got to talk about a couple things. Number one is the muzzle direction. So here, my bag gun that I've used the most successfully is this 511 Sling bag. Now, there's a lot of other bags that you can play with, but I found that, many of them got bigger, and I'm trying to reduce my profile. So this was the smallest bag I could find to put this Sig Rattler inside of. All right, so when it comes to the muzzle's direction, my recommendation is to keep that muzzle pointed down, right? Different bags are probably going to give you a different kind of feel, but in this bag, I had better control of that muzzle's direction in the downward position than I did in the upward position. Now, one of the bad things about that is it's taking this muzzle, which is little kind of like restricted metal piece, and it's pushing it hard at the bottom of the bag. Now, I carried this for about a couple weeks, just to kind of get a feel for what kind of wear and tear I could see on this bag, and honestly, it worked out fine. There's probably some things that you can do. You could probably insert some extra lining at the very bottom here to just make sure that this does not, because that point is bearing all that weight, that it just doesn't poke through. The other thing that I was trying to do was I was trying to avoid a spherical object poking out the bottom of the bag. I wanted some kind of diffusion here so that it didn't look like maybe the muzzle poking out the bottom of my carry bag here. Now, the next thing we talk about is what is the carry condition for the weapon system. All right, unlike the handgun that's on my body, that is carried in the highest level of readiness possible. Round in the chamber, magazine in the gun, good to go. All right, with this, I am going to suggest that the way that you carry this is going to be empty chamber, loaded magazine, weapon on safe. Now, some folks could make the argument that they would rather drop the hammer on the empty chamber, leave the selector switch on fire with the magazine inserted. I get it, I understand that, but my concern is that I don't see a significant value in doing that versus the safety that I risk. Once I charge this gun, it's hot, it's ready to go. I may not be ready. Do I have the presence of mind to make sure that I flick that safety back on? Maybe, maybe not. All right, so for me, the suggestion that I make and how I carried was empty chamber, safety on, magazine inserted. All right, which means regardless of what system, I do not feel that it is safe for you to load with a round in the chamber. And the reason being is because I feel as though this safety can easily be swiped off. And now this trigger is hot. Inside the bag, it's out of my personal control. There's nothing to protect the trigger. So for me, I find it much better to ensure that the safety's on, empty chamber, and loaded magazine. Now, whether you carry with the safety on or the safety off hammer forward, you're still going to have to charge the weapon. And what I learned in working with this weapon system is, unlike my M4 where I could just kind of come down on the one back on the actual handle on one side, what I found to be the best and most reliable was actually using more of the lobster claw and racking the action using the lobster claw. Just sometimes the way it came out, particularly when the stock was folded, I had much better reliability on fully charging the weapon system when I worked with that lobster claw technique. Now, the other thing is, do I run with the sling or without? Okay, I will tell you that I prefer to run with the sling on, and that creates an additional problem because now the sling can potentially snag on anything, including the bag and myself. So it is problematic. So you can practice and play and figure out what works best for you. But what I found to be valuable was the ability for me to run without the sling slung up, but have it available so that if I needed to go hands-on, I could quickly sling up. I just found having a long arm without a sling to be problematic, right? Once the situation has resolved itself or has simmered down, what do I do with the PDW? What do I do with my bag gun? Well, yes, of course, I could probably put it back in the bag, but having a sling just makes it a little bit easier. So you'll have to weigh the odds. You'll have to play with it. I ran it with and without a sling, so we'll do a couple here just so you can kind of see the difference. Now, deployment procedures. So again, when it came time to using this bad boy, stock was folded. All right, now I did play with actually just extending this out, finding my dot, and using a kind of like a la H&K kind of MP5 sling technique, where I find my dot and I just work right through here using this technique. That is an in extremis technique, and I wouldn't advise it unless you are just having the hordes bearing down on you. Otherwise, you're better, as soon as you get the gun out, pull the stock out and get more of a shoulder pocket. So, there are pros and cons to running that HK kind of MP5 sling style. If I have the time to sling up or extend the stock, I am probably still going to extend the stock versus slinging up. Because even though I can use the sling, so if I come in here, I can still use this sling as a improvised stock a la MP5 and get pretty good hits here. But at some point, I'm going to prefer to have that stock. Plus, slinging up takes a little bit more time than just folding this stock out or deploying this stock. All right, so deployment procedures, the way that I worked it is I would grab the gun out by the pistol grip. So I reach inside the bag, grab the pistol grip. First thing I'm doing is making sure that the safety is on. Once I've done that, I pull the gun out, maintaining muzzle discipline, flick the stock. As soon as I do that, charge the gun, then I get up on target. So I weighed the difference between charging it here and then flicking the stock versus flicking the stock and charging it. And the only advantage that you get at charging the weapon is the ability to go with more of an MP5 style technique. That's it. Otherwise, you're better off charging in that manner and then getting up on target. So play with both those techniques to figure out which one works best for you. What I did was I did a lot of dry fire. First of all, this happened during the pandemic. I spent a lot of time in the range by myself, and I spent a lot of time going through all the various bags, streamlining down until I found the bag that worked the best for me in this mission. And you can see just in this condition, this profile right here, how this bag is almost perfectly designed for this gun. Now, once I kind of eliminated some of the bags that just weren't going to work, and I got down to the bag that I felt was the best and a backup, I just started working and just worked on that deployment procedure, worked on it. So that dry fire practice really helped me to kind of figure out a couple of the kinks or a couple of the kind of like the tips that I want to leave you with here. But what we're going to show is the baselines that I did. So what I did was I shot baselines starting at the 5, the 10, and the 25. It was a 3-round drill to a 8-inch target on a silhouette. And what I was trying to do was to collect some metrics here. So I had to get all the shots, all right? So no matter how fast I was, I had to be able to get 3 hits on target. Then we collected all the data points as far as the time was concerned. Measured out the 5, the 10, and the 25 to kind of see, which was the dominating weapon system at each of those yard lines. So what I found was, obviously at the close range, the handgun, without a doubt. Get into the handgun was way faster than getting to this. The 10-yard line, there were a couple runs where maybe this was a little bit faster, but this was way more accurate. Right, the handgun was certainly faster, and if I had to take headshots at the 10-yard line that were, like really kind of like small headshots, maybe somebody hiding behind somebody else, yeah, I would rather have had this. It wasn't until the 25 that this really started to come into its own. Back at the 25, yeah, it took me some time to maybe kind of like settle in on the handgun, but this bad boy just went to town. So, yeah. The 10-yard and in, your handgun is definitely going to be faster at delivering effective fire. But when you get back to those extended ranges, I would assume maybe the 20 and beyond, that's where taking the time to deploy this out of your bag and getting effective fire on target really is going to pay off. All right, so let's go ahead and jock up and see what this is going to be like live fire. Okay, so we've done a nice side-by-side comparison, get a feel for really where are the strengths and weaknesses of each of those different ideas. Definitely the everyday carry handgun is much more versatile from a close range kind of perspective. I can definitely get out, get rounds on target fairly quickly, 10 and in. At the 25, yeah, I've got to take a little bit more time to make good, accurate shots, but it's still manageable. When you look at the PDW, look at your bag gun, breaking your bag gun into the fight, you know, at the close range, whether I'm shooting with the stock or if I'm shooting, you know, a la HK method, it's still not as fast as my handgun. And so at those close ranges, you're gonna wanna probably favor that handgun. You move back to the 10-yard line and the handgun is still gonna dominate, it really is. But the rifle starts to come into its own, and when you need to make precise shots or really need to deliver good power, now we're talking. You get back to that 25-yard line and you could just shoulder mount that weapon system and get good rounds on target. That's where you really start to see the difference. Really start to see the difference. The time is still going to be slower than a handgun, but the accuracy is going to be higher. So the hardest part about carrying a bag gun is getting the gun out of the bag. After that, the gun is pretty much good to go. All right, so if you have questions or comments or you've tried or played with this kind of a scenario before, we'd love to hear your experience and observations. Please feel free to post them down below. Until then, take care and stay safe.